Alright, so I just finished a Rough Country 3 1/4 inch suspension lift for a 4-door Jeep Wrangler. All in all, it went pretty smoothly. A little bit of an overview on how I kind of got it done. The first thing you want to do is disconnect anything that is going to be preventing the front axle from fully dropping to where you can actually get the coil springs out. So the first thing I did was disconnected the traction bar so it mounts on the passenger side of the axle and then goes up towards the driver's side and it mounts on the frame. So the only bolt that I actually took out was just the axle side, and just let it hang there. And then after that, I started to disconnect the sway bar end links, and actually have to take them out on the kit. They have you bring the rear ones and bring them up to the front. So these are actually the rear. So after that, then you can start taking out the nut that holds the top of the shock on. That's kind of a pain. After that, disconnect the lower shock bolt, and then you can pull the factory shock out. And after that, you can actually, the axle will actually drop down enough to where you can pull the old coil out. And as you can see, I use these tall jack stands, and just slowly dropped it to where I can get them out. Then I kind of went around and cleaned everything that I could get to with everything out. I mean, I just took a rag and cleaned it. The driver's side was a little bit of a pain to get the axle to drop far enough to where I could get the new coil in. And on the lift kit, there's a pretty decent sized bushing, rubber bushing, whatever you want to call it. I believe that's what gives it the actual 3 1/4 inch lift on top of the 2 1/2 to make it a 3 1/4. Once I got that in, went to the passenger side and got that coil in. And then you kind of just start putting it back together. You're actually going to have to raise the axle back up enough to where it's not drooping enough to you can connect that shock back up. And then like I said, you have to take the rear sway bar end links off and bring them up front. So once you do that, the front end's basically done. I was kind of reading up that the easiest way to get that bolt back in there, because it is a pain in the ass, is that they actually say to put it back on the ground, put the wheels and tires back on, put it on the ground, and then turn the wheel back and forth, and it should push that back to where you can get that bolt in. That bolt is that one. So I'm kind of waiting for the tires to be mounted to put that back together. And then I moved on to the rear. So honestly, it's basically the same way you do it. I disconnected the traction bar on the axle side, and this one is opposite. So the mount on the axle is on the driver's side, and then it goes up to the passenger side frame. So I just disconnected the traction bar from the axle side, just left it hanging. Took the sway bar end links off, and then started to do the shocks. Disconnected there, and then I don't know if you can see, yep, right there. Take those out, and then again, just like how I have it set up, I started to lower the axle out, and actually those just basically fell out once the axle was fully drooped. And then again, honestly, just started putting it back together. This side has a rubber bushing up there also. So you gotta make sure you get those out, the factory ones. And right there, that one and that one. So make sure you get those out before you start putting it back together. Once you kind of get those, and I kind of was expecting them coils to be a little bit of a pain in the ass since they are taller to get back in, but I mean, for the most part, I kind of pulled down on the axle a little bit, and they slid right in. So got that one in, and then got the passenger side one in, and started jacking it back up to where it's somewhat underweight. Put there, and these are the Rough Country sway bar end links. Yep. And so put those back on both sides. Started putting the shock on. I did leave it. They come with a band around it, compressed. So I left it compressed. Put those 2 bolts in, and then I cut the band and kind of guided it down into those brackets. And again, you're probably going to have to jack that axle up a little bit to where you can get that bolt in. And then also the kit does come with a sway bar. I guess you want to call it a riser. You know, I don't know what they actually call it, but it bolts to the mounts for the 4-link, the bottom one. So here's the bottom 4-link. And then it bolts to the back side of it, right above the bottom side of the shock mount. And then it just slides right over the existing traction bar bracket. And then it gives you 3 different holes. Again, same situation. It's a pain in the ass to get it lined up, as you can see. You know, it's not. So they said that once it's kind of under its own weight, it should compress enough to where, you know, you figure out which hole it needs to be in. And honestly, they did give drop brackets for the brake lines. This one is pretty easy. I mean, it just, you know, follows that frame rail up, drops. Same as the other side. So I'm probably going to use those drop brackets on the rear, right here. So mounts in the factory hole, and then gives you the hardware to put it, you know, drop it. The front, just kind of looking at it, and I mean, honestly, they say to straighten the line out, but when I started to drop this axle out, and you do have to take those out to drop it fully, take that 10mm bolt out and just let it go and put the bolt back in there so you don't lose it. When I kind of got it under some weight, that bracket, it kind of seemed to be, you know, half inch lower than where it is supposed to be. So I didn't put those drop brackets in, just for the fact that I didn't really want to straighten those brake lines out. I did kind of give them a little bit of a tug to, you know, see if I could get a little bit extra. But, you know, I don't know if you know, but when a vehicle's on a lift, that axle droops to way lower than what it really ever will. And it's tight, but it's not, you know, it's nothing I'm gonna really worry about. I'll definitely, once I get the wheels and tires back on it, I'll kind of address it a little bit further and see what has to happen. Well, like I said, I just took this and just kind of pulled and straightened it out a little bit. And it seems like it's doing okay. But like I said, I'm gonna for sure use the drop brackets on the rear. So it goes to the factory hole. So I'm going to drop it wherever it needs to be. And other than that, it was easy. I would have to say, I don't know if I didn't do it on the ground with floor jacks or anything, but it took me about 3.5 hours total to do front and rear and get it all back together and ready to be put down and back on the ground. I would say if you're doing it on the floor, you know, with just regular floor jacks, I'd put aside 4 or 5 hours to get it done, just in case. You know, as long as you're pretty handy. Other than that, it was simple. Everything came that I needed. When I first unboxed it, the first thing I did was go through the parts list and check off everything. And this is the new rear traction bar bolt and nut and all that stuff. And it did seem like they gave me a couple extra bolts and washers. I don't know. These are for the brake line drop bracket. Like I said, it was pretty self-explanatory. You know, you just disconnect anything that's going to prevent that axle from fully dropping out to get those coils out. Once you get the coils out, if you want to clean that area up, go forward. If not, start putting it back together and move on to the rear. Or if you start at the rear, move to the front. Other than that, I like the Rough Country kit just solely on the fact of price point. I know that they have the option of giving a lower it drops that bracket down a little bit to, you know, prevent some of that travel angle to be too excessive. So yeah, I am kind of new to YouTube, so I'm giving it a shot. This is my girlfriend's 2014 Jeep Wrangler four-wheel drive, 4-door. You know, it's just the sport. But I am going to be trying to get some more videos of the process on all this. This is my 2002 Dodge Ram 2500 with the Cummins in it. I did a 2.5-inch coil plus coil to level the truck out, and then did some eBay special 4-link, whatever you want to call it, and it pushed the axle up forward. Got a adjustable traction bar, all good kind of stuff. Built my own traction bars for the rear. I am in the process of taking this apart, and as you can see, it sweats some horsepower pretty good. So I am in the process of taking this apart and gonna reseal it. I think the front main seal, oil filter, gaskets. I don't know if I'm gonna do the tappet cover or not. And then I'm gonna do a few little things to it. This is a 6-position switch, relay, whatever you want to call it. And then I have it mounted right up there. So as you can see, it is all taken apart. No radio, and I plan on just taking the whole front clip off. You know, trans cooler, AC, intercooler, radiator, front shroud, fan, everything. Take it apart and reseal the motor. So it's not the SEMA build of a lifetime, but it's got 150,000 miles, no rust. Just slowly gonna build it to what I want it to. So until the next one, take it easy.